Welcome to the Christ Connection podcast. We are here to help and encourage you to enjoy your adventure with Jesus. I'm your host, Kevin Senapati-Ratna. Let the journey begin. Hello and welcome to the Christ Connection podcast. My name is Kevin Senapati-Ratna, and I'm glad you could join us today as we help you on your adventure with Jesus. That's what it is all about. But today we're going to talk about when you go on that adventure with Jesus, you're going with people. There's people who say, you are the sum total of the 5 closest relationships in your life. My home pastor, I think he may be quoting someone else, but says relationships are like elevators. They take you up or they take you down. And so relationships are super important, but we often don't think about the relationships in our lives, and they really can make a difference that whether we accomplish the things that God has for us and whether we don't accomplish the things that God has for us. And so our conversation today is very important. My guest is Dr. Dharius Daniels, and he is a lead pastor of Change Church, and it's a vibrant ministry that impacts all ages, socioeconomic classes, ethnic backgrounds. It's 6,000 people, multiple campuses, and so he's got some credentials there, but then also he's got some academic credentials, Bachelor's of Art and Political Science from Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi, a Master's of Divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary, and a Doctorate of Ministry from Fuller Theological Seminary. So he brings both the practical and the academic to his latest book, Relational Intelligence, and we dive into all sorts of areas from the book, talking about how we need to think about our relationships and how they matter, what they can do, and you're just going to get a lot of benefit, I think, from this conversation. So hang it with, take some notes. You're going to be blessed as we go through this. So without further ado, my conversation with Dr. Dharius Daniels. All right. Well, Dr. Daniels, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here. Excited. Thank you for having me.
It is. I'm looking forward to our conversation and where we go with this. This is we're going to talk in a couple moments about your book, Relational Intelligence, the people skills you need for the life of purpose you want. A great book. I enjoyed it. So looking forward to it. But I always like to kind of get you off your game a little bit because you can get into script probably. But so let's talk about something else other than we were talking beforehand about your Detroit needs there. We'll steer clear of that. Let's talk about God and how he's always messing with me anyways. I don't know about you, but he's always messing with me. What's the current state of where he's messing with you?
So I'm going to capture that in one word. So I'm with you. I feel I'm chronically being messed with. I'm not aware of a season where I'm not being messed. So I'm going to capture that in one word, and that's stewardship. And so this is what I mean. What I mean by that, I don't mean stewardship necessarily in the area of resources, but I've been being dealt with in this area of stewardship specifically as it relates to the area of time, and how I had kids really early. So I just made 40 this year. But
congratulations.
But so I had when I was married at 21 or so, had my first son 22, 23. So I'm 40 and I've got a kid going to college.
Wow.
At the end of this year. And I recognize, like when Solomon says, like, life is a vapor. And so if you don't steward seasons well, you are setting an appointment for regret. Like I'm able to look at my 18-year-old who's getting ready to go to college, and I'm able to say to myself, obviously there's some things I wish I had done differently, and I'm going to grieve him leaving the house and moving on, but I'm going to have grief but not regret. We played t-ball together. We played basketball together. I'm at football games and basketball games. And so just recognizing the importance of stewarding time well. That's just something that happened by the grace of God. He and I kind of grew up together. I feel like, 22 is really young to have a kid. But I feel like we kind of grew up together. So for me, I'm looking at not just as a parent, but as it relates to life, and it's stewarding the seasons of life I'm in well, and trying to invest them for kingdom gain. So that's where I am right now.
That's awesome. I love that phrase. Set an appointment for regret. We don't want to mess with that.
Yeah.
That's tweetable right there. All right. All right. And so, with that shift, is there any particular habits or things that you're trying to do differently? I know what to talk about some with relationships, but any other areas that you've been kind of making a shift with?
Yeah, definitely ministry. Ministry wise, I'm asking myself, as it relates to my time, um, what is the highest and best use of Dharius Daniels in the season that I'm in? And this is what I've learned about that. I've learned about this is the case professionally. It probably applies personally too. That when it comes to other people's desire to use your time, they want to use it. And doesn't mean they're bad people, but they want to use it in a way that aligns with their priorities. So, can you give me some time because this is important to me, and I think this should be important to you. And it doesn't mean that it's not important, but it does mean that in this season, I'm really trying to be clear on, hey, what are my ministry priorities in this season, and how can I steward my time in a way where I'm throwing myself into those things so that I don't get to a season of life in the future and I look back and say, man, I wish I would have stewarded that season differently.
That's so wise. And stewardship is really the heart. It feels to me a part of the heart of the book, Relational Intelligence. It's about stewarding our relationships. And one of the things for me, this is just me, but I'm a King David. I love the story with King David and all of the things that he goes through and the lessons we can learn there. And one of the things I got from Relational Intelligence, you seem to make multiple references to his relationship with Joab. Now, it might just be me reading between the lines, but normally that means there's more to the story. Can you share some of the maybe why that story spoke to you, or what about David and Joab's relationship we can learn from?
Yeah, so you're right. It is that story. That story did speak to me in a really unique way, and I'm gonna tell you why. So first of all, it spoke to me personally because I felt like I went through a season where I had people in my life who were like Joab's. Like Joab had this kind of, I think, I make the distinction in the book between like a cultural loyalty and a biblical loyalty. One's healthy, one's unhealthy. Right? And so Joab was so loyal to David, he participated in David's dysfunction. So Joab was the one that David sent orders to kill Bathsheba's husband. And he was so loyal to David, it was an unhealthy loyalty. He participated, he was an accessory to David's self-destruction. And I feel like there was a season in my life where, I'm type A personality, I'm driven, and I was surrounded by people like that in my life. And so it's start something and write something and do something and build something. And there was a loyalty there, but it was a type of loyalty that I felt like was helping helping me self-destruct. And I just think that experience personally like opened my eyes in a way and gave me a set of glasses through which I read the scriptures differently. And I just saw that in Joab's story. And it really caused me to do some evaluating when it came to, what kind of, sometimes the loyalty you want is not the loyalty you need.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't just need yes men. Yeah. So,
Boy,
oh
I,
yes.
and I love the Bible's dealing with Joab. It's a complex relationship. There are times when uh, Joab does stuff like, what's going on here? And you're like, but then that's the same as our relationships. There's times you're like, why is that person doing that? What's the backstory there? Uh, any other, I mean, it was that kind of what led you to write the book? I mean, what that season of, what's the kind of the backstory of why you write a book about relational intelligence?
Okay, yeah. So I think the major contributing factor for me writing the book was not just what happened to me personally. I think is what I saw pastorally. So I'm a pastor, and so I have the privilege. It is one of the highest honors of my life, the privilege of being in the people business. And so, um, with that being the case, you get this unique insight into the way, into just an extraordinary amount of people's lives. And what I began to see as a pastor, right, and like walking with people throughout life's journey, is that people's greatest joy and greatest pain came from the same place. It was relationships. I mean, people saying I do and getting married, great joy. Marriage not working out, great pain. A child being birthed into the world, great joy. Having to bury a child, great pain. So I saw like directly and indirectly this link to joy and pain, uprisings, downfalls, not exclusively, but uh, primarily being attributed to people's relationships, not just who they had in their life, but what place they gave them. See, everyone that may have a place in our life doesn't have the same place. And that's what relational intelligence is about. It's about kind of defining and aligning those relationships, not just for your peace internally, but also for your productivity and for the accomplishment of your purpose.
And that's one of the things I really loved about the book was that idea of thinking about your relationship. Sometimes we just kind of go through our lives and are not just letting relationships happen to us. And you're challenging people to say, okay, think about what you're doing and where these people fit into your story. Um, how how does defining relationships help us? I mean, you kind of touched on that, but how does that? Can you break that down a little bit more? What that helps us in our relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, the process of like defining is what I would call fruit inspection. And that's what Jesus, because I've gotten this question before, like, what do you mean? Like defining relationships? Like you're categorizing people like shoes. You know what I mean? I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. Or some people feel like defining relationships is making judgments. And so I'm not saying, when I say, that's why I use the word fruit inspection, because Jesus said, hey, trees by the fruit that they bear. So it's not our place to say that's a good tree or a bad tree. That's judgment. But it is our place to say that's an apple tree and that's an orange tree. And I don't like apples or I don't like oranges. So I feel like defining relationships is important for a couple of reasons. The first of which is so that you can be clear on what to expect from it. Like a lot of relationship frustration comes because we have wrong expectations. It's like me looking at, I got this the dog owner, the lady we bought it from, she got us. So we thought we were getting a Maltipoo because she told us this was a Maltipoo. And my wife surprised me with the dog. And so when she gave me the dog, I'm looking at this dog and I'm like, this is the weirdest looking Maltipoo I've seen. I was like, this dog looks like it's got a little Yorkie in it. And then when we started training him, I was like, this, I've had a Yorkie before. I'm like, this is a stubborn dog. This is not a Maltipoo. This is a Yorkie. But it's like, this is an inferior analogy, but the point that I'm making is it's like me expecting a Yorkie, which can be temperamental and stubborn and obstinate, expecting a Yorkie to behave like a Maltipoo. It's just not. It's gonna be a course of a source of frustration for me. So I feel like the same thing applies in relationships. When you define a relationship, you know what to expect from it, and then more importantly, you know what to invest in it. And I think that's really really important.
But- And I don't think that was an inferior analogy. I'm all about the dogs. So we can talk dogs. My dog's over there sleeping, and I don't know inferior how that's gonna. I have to work him down so he's ready for these interviews. So he's not
Right.
not too excited, but uh, going with that idea, I mean, one of the challenges I think for Christians is if you're defining relationships, you're just not quote unquote being nice, I guess maybe is you're not being by not letting everyone in. I was watching a video where you make the distinction between uh, gates and walls,
Mm.
and where uh, people like you're not building up walls to people, you're putting up gates. You may not even remember, you probably do lots of stuff, but uh, how and you say some people aren't bad people, they're just bad for you,
Yeah.
uh and that's just such a powerful truth. Can you because this is something I'm still learning, I'm still because you want to be nice, you want to be uh, you know quote unquote that's the Christian thing to do. What Any thoughts on why that's so hard for us and how we can work through that whole idea?
So I'm not trying to over spiritualize this, right? I know pastors have a tendency to do that, right? Like everything. Sometimes people are like, "Hey, I just need an answer." But for me, not trying to over spiritualize it, I do think that part of the reason we have a hard time doing that is because many times in Christian circles, we feel like being a good steward of your own soul and self is actually being selfish. So we are called to live sacrificial lives. Obviously, that's the case. So I'm not disputing that at all. I am saying living sacrificially doesn't mean that I become a poor steward of my own life. And I think that is what makes it really, really difficult for people sometimes to put up walls or to put up gates. I think it not only affects um, how you define a relationship, I think it affects how people interact in relationships. I feel like not knowing the difference between those two things, selfishness and stewardship, causes people to feel like forgiveness means reconciliation, and it does not. And I think it also causes people to think that forgiveness means trust,
Right.
and it doesn't. Like forgiveness is a grace gift, it's a gift that's been given to us. We've got to give it to others. But trust is something that's earned based on the trustworthiness of the person we're in relationship with. And I feel like all of that just kind of goes back to Christians confusing um, being good stewards of your own life with being selfish. Like Jesus said, we love our neighbor as we love ourselves. So if we don't get the self love part right, we won't get the love and neighbor part right.
Well, and speaking of Jesus, I mean, he was very intentional about his relationships. He was
Yeah.
he was very clear. And reading another book now, Gary Thompson. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's coming out with a book called "When to Walk Away," and it's really highlighting Jesus is saying Jesus has walked away randomly from people. Like, this is not a situation I'm going to be in. This is not a person I'm going to deal with, and we not need to be okay with that. And I'm learning.
Yeah.
uh, and and you talk about, speaking of Jesus again, his phrase about shaking the dust off of our feet, or the dust off of ourselves when we experience rejection. Um, and it's the you say it's not taking the residue of rejection from one season or relationship into another. Any
Mhm.
advice for people on how to do this in practical life?
Yeah. So I think this is what I think. I think that's easier said than done.
Right.
It's a lot easier to shake dust off literally than it is to shake dust off emotionally. Because sometimes, like, so if I'm dirty physically, I see it because it's external. If I'm carrying a residue of something emotionally, like internally and emotionally, sometimes I don't see what affected me in the past until it's triggered in the future. So I feel like practically what, the book talks a little bit about this too. I think practically what's important is self-awareness. Like being aware that I have had some experiences in the past that could affect me in terms of the way I see relationships in the future. If I'm aware that there is the potential for that, then I do a much better job at kind of managing myself, managing my emotions, assessing, hey, am I making somebody in my present uh, do the time for a crime somebody in my past committed? So I just think self-awareness is going to be key because sometimes you don't know how much something affected you in the past emotionally until you actually get into the future. You're like, oh my God, it's like some people grow up, I want to be nothing like my dad. And then you have kids, you're like, I'm just like my dad. So yeah, I think self-awareness is key.
Uh, that's so cool because yeah, we do just kind of go through our life sometimes. Again, it kind of seems a theme with you of being aware of you're aware of your relationships, you're aware of your surroundings. That seems to be uh, one of the things with that idea of stewardship. You uh, kind of have pulled through the whole book is the idea that we're not called uh, to everything. We're not just because it's there doesn't mean we're called to it. And you kind of dive deep on Acts 16, where Paul goes one place, the doors closed, goes another place, the doors closed, and then he ends up in another place. And that's for achievers like you and me. We have a hard time with that, I think, because we want to do everything. We want to accomplish everything. Can you give an example of that in your own life where you felt like you're going this way, and then you like, no, God's taking me over this way? Does that make sense?
That is my life.
Oh,
That is my life. Most people don't. I don't know if most people know this, but I was headed to law school. Like, so I was not headed in the pastoral ministry at all. Even when I felt the call to ministry, I felt it at 19, and and uh, and I fought this tug and this call to full time ministry. I fought it all the way to the last semester of my senior year. So when my classmates were getting letters of acceptance to grad schools, some of them were like getting job offers. I was just applying to seminary. That's how long it took me. So and I bring that up because I feel like, and I learned this one time in a class I was taking, that if a person really looks back over their life, you'll see the patterns and the ways in which God deals with you and kind of leads your life. And so my life has been like these series of strategic leaps. So I made the leap from law school to seminary. Then I made the leap from Mississippi all the way to New Jersey. And then I made the leap coming out of a seminary that does not produce church planners. So I went to Princeton Seminary. And so you don't go to Princeton and come out of Princeton and plant a church. I love Princeton. I'm an adjunct there, or I've been an adjunct professor there and all of that. So I love Princeton. I want to be clear. But it's not typically the place you think of when you think of church planters. So anyway, the point that I'm making is, yeah, that seems to be a pattern in my life, and I think one of the things, at least I'm learning with that and trying to lean into, is this: that God never blocks a door or locks a door or closes a door in order to lead me to an inferior room. That when, like, his no is always a setup for a better yes. And so that's hard if you type A and if you're driven, you know. But it's like, okay, this, if he blocked this, he is not blocking this to lead me to something that's inferior. So that's just kind of my train of thought with that. That's how I'm trying to manage it.
That's amazing. That's a great way to process that. You said there that God has certain ways of dealing with us, whereas each of us are kind of unique in the way he deals. And I think that's so true. Has there been anything, to follow up with that, anything that has helped you to see how God's, do you have a system like journaling, or what do you use so that you see, okay, God seems to do this, he makes me leap? Is there ways that you do that so that you can catch those things that God's doing?
Yep. So two things. So this is what I do currently. You hit it spot on. I journal. So there's an app that I use to journal, and that's great because I'm able to I'm able to see trends of trends in terms of, this is what, hey, this is what God was kind of dealing with me on in this season, or this seems to be. Sometimes you can be stuck in an area emotionally, and you can look through your journal and be like, you know what, I complained about the same thing. You know, I complained about the same thing for 4 months. I didn't know that. Same old, same old. So that was one. But man, I did this when I was in doctoral class. I did this. I went through this process with this gentleman named Dr. Terry Wallen, and it was one of the most transformative exercises I've ever gone through. It's really a discernment tool, and from time to time, I use it to show others. And so it's this, basically, he takes you through this process where you take this whiteboard, you take all these different color stickers, and he takes you through this process where you divide your life up into categories. And you just write down everything that's significant, that you feel like is significant in that category. So those things that were positive, you write down. Those things that were negative, you write those things down. And you color code it. And it's amazing how, in doing that and dividing your life up in those categories, you're able to see the ways that God has dealt with you. That's how I was able to see that God deals with me in leaps. And that was probably the most significant. I mean, I'm not doing it justice, but that was probably the most significant discernment tool I've ever used in terms of giving me clarity.
And what was the name of the person who put that together?
His name was Terry Walling.
Terry Walling.
Terry Walling, yeah.
Well,
he taught a class at Fuller Seminary when I was there.
Very cool. I got to ask, since you mentioned journaling app, what do you have a specific journaling app, or just like a notes app that you use? Just, what is that practical?
It's not special. It's like some random. Yeah, some random.
Nothing that's gonna, because I've said on this podcast many times I'm not very good at the journaling thing, and part of that I think is I have a hard time going back. I'll journal for a while and then it just sits in a pile, so I never go back to it. And so I'm trying to figure out a system that will work where I actually go back to it and see the pattern. So I'm like,
I only do it. I try to do it once a week, and I'm not always consistent with that. And it's real quick. I can't do it long. Naming and taming what I'm feeling, and that helps me with self-awareness, definitely.
Also, once a week, that's kind of a cool idea. Rather than I think every day when I think journaling, so that's cool. Going back to the book, one of the things you say, encourage people, is to be authentic with everyone, but transparent with only a few. What do you? how do you differentiate between authentic and transparent, and how do you make that distinction for yourself?
So what I mean when I say authentic, I mean that in every sense of the word, meaning that in every space and every relationship you find yourself in, you should not feel the pressure to be anyone besides yourself. Like I'm in a season in my life where I don't want a relationship with anybody that I have to be someone other than myself to be, right? That's a job. That's a parishioner. That's you know what I mean. That is a that it's just period. So that's what I mean by that. But when I talk about transparency, I think there are things that I'm talking about the disclosure of some of your most innermost emotions and innermost issues. And so I feel like that's why in the book, when I talk about the friend category, those are places and spaces where there's a different kind of transparency because those are people that you've discerned have my best interests at heart and are what Henry Cloud calls safe people. They're people I can be transparent with, I can disclose this with, and they're safe. And I feel like Jesus modeled that when he went on the Mount of Transfiguration. He only took 3 out of the 12 disciples. So they saw him at his best. His divinity was disclosed. But then we went to the Garden of Gethsemane. He took those same 3 out of the 12, where his humanity was disclosed. And so for me, transparency isn't always like just disclosing the worst of you. Sometimes it might be the best of you. Like for me, I recently lost a friend who was on my staff. He was with us for about 13 years. He passed away very young, 43 years old. And one of the things that I lost when I lost that relationship with him is I lost the first person besides my wife that I would call whenever I got a win. You know?
Okay. Yep.
So to me, that's transparency also. People that you can disclose not just the worst of life, but also kind of the best of life too. And you know they're genuinely excited for you and they want to hear it and you want to tell them.
Like that, we need those people who are going to get excited when we have a win. We need those
Yeah.
people that, yeah, that's one of the things I'm trying to learn is who do I share the good news with? Because
Mhm.
some people, uh, even if they're good people, they're just not going to get excited like you you want them to. When you won the Super Bowl, you don't want someone who's like, oh, okay, that's great. That's
Mhm.
one of the things you talk about in the book is that you make a distinction that people need to, as they choose categories for people, for I'm not using your words well, but that you have to have those conversations with people about where they're going to land on that,
Yes.
and that can go not so well, and any example or advice or something that you've done that helps that not be so difficult?
Yeah. So I learned that. I learned that just by doing it wrong so long. So that's right. I think a lot of the book I learned just by doing wrong so like if you're doing the wrong thing after you do the wrong thing so many times and you see it never works, at some point you accept like, yeah, this isn't ever going to work doing it this way. And so there are times when there is like people in a certain, for lack of a better word, place in your life category. We're putting people in their place. There are times when people are who are in a certain place, and this is what happens. Life happens with you and you change, or life happens with them and they change. And with that being the case, that may mean a change in place. And I don't want to come off cynical here at all because I'm not. I'm an optimist, but I do believe that there's this assumption that we make with people that they always change for the better. and I'm not trying to be a cynic, but I do want to be a realist. I think Jesus was. There are times where people change for the worse. And that doesn't mean they're bad people. Sometimes they hit bad seasons and it shapes and molds them in a certain way. And, I think what most of us would like to do is like kind of shift the relationship without having conversations. It's like, um, but I feel like, the scriptures teach to speak the truth in love. And this is what I've learned. When you don't fill in the blanks and give people a reason, the devil will. And the reason he gives them is always worse than the reason you give them. So we actually, in the book, it's why we created mock scripts in the book. Like, we really want to be so practical to give people guidance on how to have some of these conversations where when you're communicating, hey, there needs to be a change in this relationship, you're communicating it from a place that communicates what you need and what you have to do for you in this season and not who they aren't, and making judgments about them. And so we feel like the scripts really give people guidance on how to have some of those tough conversations. And I got the idea about a script. The idea for a script came to me because years ago I was reading this book on just productivity and time management, and the guy gave examples of the way he says no to requests. I was like, man, he said no, and it sounded so nice. Like, so he gave that example, and it triggered something for me years later when I was writing this book, how helpful that example was for me. And it helped me frame my own approach, right, to saying no. But sometimes we just need that boost and that jump start. And so that was the idea behind the scripts in the book.
No, and I think that's so helpful to people to have a framework that works. And so that's why I think the book does such a great job. You pick your situation and you obviously make it your own, and probably don't bring out the book and start move that page when you go. But maybe you do. Maybe then you hand them the book and you sell another copy. But it's I think that works in, some of those small practical tips. One of the things for me, I heard Bob Goff talk about, anyone who emails him, he gets 3 sentences back. And I'm like, that's just powerful, because because then you're not spending an hour with, but if someone emails you, you're going to give them something back, if they get your email address or whatever. And so sometimes those simple things in life and that script that you give people, I think is really helpful. And again, you're talking, it's not, they're not bad people necessarily. Now they may be, they may have changed and they're bad people now, but you're not saying that. You're saying, this is not good for me right now. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, it's spot on. And I'll push it a little further and say, I make that distinction, meaning between bad people and bad for me. I make that distinction for a couple of reasons. One of the primary reasons is I'm not saying that there aren't bad people in the world. I think that's, we look at violence and kidnappings and assaults and all that. So I'm not saying that, or people don't do bad things. But I feel like making that distinction, bad person, bad for me, helps remove the fear of judgment. So there are times when people won't draw lines in the sand because they feel like they're judging. So I just feel like using that language helps take the judging out of it. And you're able to make a decision because you're able to be honest and say, I think this is bad for me. I'm not saying you're a bad person. This is bad for me. So it's about me, not you. And you're able to move on.
And you talk a lot of, and I think I also saw in a video about how this works out in family scenarios. And that's, when you're not saying the person's bad, maybe bad for me, I think really is true in family situations, maybe even more so, because just because you have a history of things that may cause you that person to be a negative to you just because of the history that's attached to it, that it wouldn't be necessarily to someone else.
Yeah, definitely.
Uh, uh, and Well, we're running near our end here. I think there's a lot more people can learn from this, so they'll have to go pick up the book. But
Mhm.
I didn't want to get because you've been, I mean, it's Dr. Darius Daniels, so you've been in school for a long time and you've heard from a lot of people.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, what is some of the best advice that you've received from someone else over the years? Again, it could be a professor, but it could be anyone that you think of that you've received some good advice that has helped you along the way.
Yeah, I've got tons. I have. I think who we all are is the compilation of contributions that people have made to us throughout the years. I think so. God is at work in people and through people, shaping us into who He intends for us to be. So there are tons, but I think as it relates to um, for me, the thing that kind of sticks out the most just right now at the top of my head is kind of the statement that I put in the book about be authentic with everyone, but transparent with a few. And so this is what I mean by that. Some people can hear that statement and just focus on being transparent with a few and miss the fact that there needs to be a few in your life that you're transparent with. Right? They can just think of, hey, they can just hear that statement and say, I'm not going to be transparent with it with everybody. All right, that's good, but it's more to a statement than that. No, there needs to be a circle that you are transparent with, because who you become and where you end up in life is not just based on who you are, it's also based on who you're with. That's Proverbs 13:20. We become like who we walk with. That's 1 Corinthians 15:33. Don't be deceived, bad company corrupts good character. So for me, that's probably relationally some of the best advice I've gotten.
That's awesome. All right. So where can people learn about the book? Where can people find out more about you, or online, whatnot, wherever you want to send people, and any final ask that you have of the audience?
Yeah, this is so people can actually, depending on when they're listening to this, well, at any point they can go to Darius Daniels RQ.com. DariusDanielsRQ.com. That's DHARIUS DANIELS RQ.com. And we've got a couple of free sample chapters of the book that people can download and they can get a sense of what the book is actually about. We're actually really soon going to be releasing a RQ test, a relational intelligence assessment. And so they'll be able to take that also for free right there at DariusDanielsRQ.com. And if they want to purchase the book, they'll be able to do that. And for everyone who, depending on when they hear this, pre-orders the book, we actually did a relational intelligence e-course. I had a conversation with a group of people, a small group of people from our Orlando campus, and a campus in Orlando, Florida. And we were just having conversations about some of the concepts in the book, because it's like one thing to read a book. Sometimes you're reading a book, you're like, I get that, but what did he mean by that? And so we felt like this is a way to kind of get that out to people. So people who pre-order the book, we're going to send them that, of course, immediately to their inbox for free. And my only ask is, if it's adding value to your life, if it adds value to your life in any way, my only ask is that you share it and you spread the word about it to someone else.
Very cool. Well, we will put the links to all that in the show notes so people can find that and get to the e-course. And we'll look forward to this book getting out to the world and being a blessing to many people. So thanks for taking the time today, Dr. Daniels. It's been a good conversation.
It's been great. Thank you so much for having me. Had a blast.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I have. There was so many things to mull over and think about. I'm still way at the beginning where he said we don't want to set appointments for regrets. That's just such a powerful truth there. If you want to see the show notes, head on over to enjoyingprayer.org and just click on the podcast there, and you'll see the show notes and link to his website where he talked about sample chapters that you can get, and you want to get that while you can. So head on over again. That's enjoyingprayer.org. And click on the podcast. And if you're blessed by our ministry, I want to be a blessing to you. So why don't you subscribe to the show? That also helps us, and share it with anyone who would be a blessing to them. That's always helpful in the process of growing the ministry and online and podcast thing and all of those fun things that happen when you share it with a friend. Share it with a friend then. Or it's all about relationships today, so share it with a friend. But subscribe as well. And if you are blessed and you're still sticking around here after I'm making corny jokes here, why don't you think about and pray about becoming a financial partner of this ministry? God has put on our hearts some great things, and we're excited about what's possible. We're kind of like that plane that's taken off, and we just need the fuel to get above the tree line, and our financial partners are what do that and make that a reality. And you can help us make an impact all the way around the world. We already impacted 60 countries. We'd love to see a whole bunch more. And so you can learn all about that at enjoyingprayer.org, and just click on donate, and you can learn all about that. We'll love to see you on the inside, and got some special things for our partners there. But before you go, let me pray for you. God, I pray for each person who's listening to this. I pray that we would make wise choices in our relationships. We'd make good friendships. We'd make not just the negative things that sometimes are associated with making tough calls, and we do need to do that, Lord. But I pray also that you'd bless the people listening to this with new relationships, friends, advisors, all the people that we need to accomplish the things you have for us. I pray this in your mighty name. Amen. So God bless you as you go along your way. Thanks for listening.